and welcome to another edition of Arts and Ideas. I'm Sue Swinand, and today I'm over at the Mary Cosgrove Dolphin Gallery at Worcester State University, and we're going to be showing you a very exciting show. Everybody I talk to that has seen it loves it, and it's something you can enjoy on many different levels. It's full of surprises and humor and pathos and visual delights. It's the show called No Limits, and the artist is Nina Fletcher. And she's right here with me, and she's going to be helping us look at the work. And Nina, I'm so delighted to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. The show looks great. I couldn't be happier.
Isn't this a great gallery? They've done wonderful things with it. I'm really thrilled.
It's great. Great addition to the college, the university, and to the artists.
City.
Yeah.
And to the city of Worcester.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's tell the audience who you are a little bit first. I was looking over your resume, and I was amazed because I thought I knew this person, and I found out so many interesting facts about you that were, whoa. So how did you get started? I understand you were in the Peace Corps.
I was in the Peace Corps, and I'm not sure how that led to my art, but it certainly contributed to broadening my vision. I was in West Africa for 2 years, 69 to 71, at a very young age, and I think it forever imprinted the wide possibilities out there. When we returned, I then went into nursing.
Do you think that the need for help physically and health issues prompted the nursing choice?
Definitely. I think at the time I felt that this was something that would be useful. And I did, and I saw a great need, certainly in the Peace Corps. And then myself and my husband, we migrated to California, as so many did, to try to reinvent ourselves and to get away from provincial New England. Neither of us had ever really left it until we went into the Peace Corps. And I went on to nursing school and pursued a career in nursing before I actually started art school.
Well, what interests me about that story is that I feel like in the contemporary visual work that you do now, you're still trying to make a difference, and that art can do that, which I love. So would you say that's a fair?
I think it is. When I went into nursing, it was in the early 70s, and it was in the midst of amazing change, in particular in the women's movement, I think, and that manifested a lot in women's health, which I went into specifically, and I saw a tsunami of change just in the delivery of health care to women, in particular in obstetrics, over the course of 10 years. And I think that it influenced me a lot, that change does happen. Yes. And can happen and did happen.
That was a revolutionary period. I mean, it was obviously revolution. Everybody's ideas were turned upside down. And so then you came back and you went to Mass College of Art, right?
I did. I came back. We migrated back to Worcester, and I was kind of at a hiatus and had an opportunity, a window, and decided to go to art school. And it wasn't out of nothing I made that decision. I think I came to the arts via craft, which is a very undersung sort of area of stuff, which is, I think, never gets quite enough credit, and I'm not even sure why we break it up into the two.
I think that's becoming less and less separated with the fine craft that we see now that is so well. Your work has a lot of craft to it. It's about making things.
It is, and I was a passionate sewer and knitter, and proud of it. And even though the womanly arts or crafts at that time were sort of being underplayed because women were supposed to be doctors and lawyers, and learning how to sew was not necessarily cool at the time, I loved it. And a lot of my art was informed by my knowledge of sewing in particular. And I think you see it a lot in the work here.
Well, even I was just looking at this shoe sculpture, and even this, in a sense, is sewn. I was trying to move a few of the shoes, and I realized that this is a piece that's very solidly crafted, and it's one unit at this point, and it's sewn together with wires, I guess.
It is. It's attached with wires. One thing about sewing and craft, it's all about attaching things so that they look elegant, and you can't really tell the work that goes into how they're put together. Like a perfect seam in a garment is something that you never notice because it's so perfect and invisible. And so much of my work is involved in attaching things, and that's where I bring in my skills that I learned in sewing, among other things.
You know, thinking about the creative process, we were talking about it a little bit before, but I really like thinking about when you make things like this, you're putting things together. And it's the coolest thing because you can try. I can hold this up to that and see whether there's something going on between them or whether there's some relationship. And we were talking about a lot of your pieces which show juxtapositions of materials that suggest bigger ideas because of the choice of the materials and the way you put them together.
Yes, I think you're putting together unexpected materials highlights the materials themselves and makes people notice. Yeah. And after all, being an artist, that's what you want. You know, you want attention. You want people to notice you and your work. And so sometimes dramatic juxtapositions and dichotomies, like as you see later on in the show, some of the pocketbook series I did combine very sharp objects with very soft objects, or very stereotypically, womanly soft things with hard edge, almost violent things. And I think that playing with that balance is always interesting. A little bit of softness tinged with a little bit of violence, for lack of a better
And
word.
it's also humor tinged with a little bit of anxiety or whatever. Now, you were also the founder of the Blackstone Printers gallery right here in Worcester, the workshop studio. Let's go take a look at some prints.
Great, okay.
So I wanted to hear some details about how the Blackstone printing studio got started.
Yes, I majored in painting at Mass Art, and in my last semester of my last year started printmaking, monoprinting, and fell in love with it. And after graduating, I painted for a couple of years and decided that I was probably not going to be a painter. It's very difficult, and I kept trying to make a two-dimensional medium into a three-dimensional experience. So I started to drift into 3 dimensions, and I did get very hooked on printmaking because of the element of surprise. It wasn't so deliberate and difficult to me as painting. I saw that in Worcester there was no facility that could be used unless you were taking a class at the museum, and so I decided to start my own and rented a wonderful space in the old Haywood it was before that. It was the Haywood Shoe Factory on Winter Street. Put together a print studio. I was not a master printer by any means, but solicited the help of a master printer, Catherine Kernan of Mix-It Studio in Somerville, who helped me put it together and order the presses and create what was needed, and opened it up to the public, and the artists came and would rent time and space and create their work there. It was a great joy to see people enjoy it, and we'd also put on some wonderful shows, and it still actually exists.
So then you invited people to be able to come in from the city and use the presses?
Exactly. We invited the community, and artists came and rented the facilities because printmaking it's difficult for one person to own all the equipment you need to make a print. So
It's like a co-op.
it was like a co-op, and people came and made wonderful work. We put on shows annually that I still remember with great pride, and the printmaking studio continues to this day with a cadre of about probably eight women who hasn't always been women, but it happens to be women now.
And everybody gets their day, and they can print and spend the whole day in it's like they have their own studio. And this would have been a product of the is this a monoprint?
It is. It's a monoprint. And I think when I mentioned about wanting to get more three-dimensional, this was kind of a segue into that. It is, and actually it's an embossment. It's a piece of fabric, and how I did it...
It actually isn't a piece of fabric. It's a print of a piece of fabric.
It's a print of a piece, exactly. Although it really reads very realistically.
You would think you would be able to grab that crinoline.
You would. It reads with incredible detail, almost like an X-ray. And how I did it was really an accident, which is what printmaking is all about. I printed a plate with ink, a large plate, the size of that. I laid the fabric onto the plate. I then printed another plate of equal size and laid it on top like a sandwich. It was like a print sandwich. So I printed both sides. So this is why you have this mirror effect. Then I put it through the press, and I took apart the sandwich, removed the garment, and embossed on the printed plates was this image, which I then printed off of. In other words,
the crinoline lifted the ink off the plates, and then you ran the plates through the press.
And then I put paper on the plates and ran the print, and then pulled the prints.
Cool thing is, when you make a monoprint like this using the woman's crinoline, you know, you're throwing in all that content and connections and associations. But the physical thing is, when you were saying about the sculpture and the two-dimensional, is the fact that if I ran my hand over the print, I would feel nothing. It's perfectly smooth. But yet your brain is reading all that three-dimensional texture and volume.
Yes, and I think that's what excited me about this particular process. I use a lot of fabric in my work, and I think you'll see in the show that I use garments, I use shoes, I use accessories.
Mostly women's garments.
Women's garments. And I think some people have called me a gender-specific or gender-based artist, or I don't know quite what the word is, but obviously female things interest me a lot. And all our accoutrements and everything that kind of we hang on ourselves, our clothing, our shoes, our pocketbooks, etc. So I certainly have spent a lot of time examining that and using the actual objects as well as recreating the objects as you see in the print. Sometimes I have a piece that actually uses the clothing, and as you saw before, the shoe ball, where I actually take the object and try to refigure it into something that makes you think a little bit more about the object.
Well, one of the series that I really enjoy on that concept is the purses or pocketbooks, and the way in that piece where you have the red velvet interior of the pocketbook showing, it's kind of like a big mouth, and then instead of the zipper you have the shark's teeth, which, you know, and I think that series is called Feed Me.
Well, there's one piece called Feed Me, and the series was called My Pocketbook Myself, which was kind of a riff on the old feminist health manifesto called Our Bodies Ourselves, which of course I was very into, being in the female health world. But yes, the pocketbook has always been kind of a secret place, a hidden place, a place where You better not go unless you're invited.
And you keep your private things there.
Very, very private place. And also a little bit dangerous, a little bit uncertain what's in there. Also a little bit ridiculous in that we women carry these burdensome bags on our shoulders practically everywhere.
With all our accoutrements.
With all our accoutrements and all our necessities, which if you really look at it is absurd. But it does give us a kind of a feeling of self-control, maybe, or self-sufficiency.
Or security.
And security.
Yeah.
But it's also a no-no place to go for strangers, hence the teeth for the opening. Like, no, can't go there.
One of the things I noticed about your work over the years is how diverse it is and how you do so many different kinds of materials. And one of the best things was to be able to see a large body of your work in one place, because what hit me is, as diverse as these different series are, like the button series, where you've done the portraits with tiny little buttons like a pointillist, there's somehow the sensibility is so visible when you see all these different series together. Do you always work in series like that?
I do. I tend to work in series because there's always a learning curve when I start working with a new medium. And as you see, I work with a lot of different media. So the medium that I choose will dictate what I do and what the content will be, because certain things can be done with certain things and not others. The button series came from the fact that I had a big jug of buttons, and I looked at them and said, what can I do with these? And how I made the connection between pointillism and these buttons were actually little pieces of mosaic and actually doing it, I'm not sure. But again, I think it was my background in sewing and seeing that helped me make that leap. So I treated each button as a piece of mosaic, and I decided to do portraits, 5 portraits of the women in my family. And this started with the birth of my granddaughter, with whom, of course, I was madly in love. So I wanted to do a portrait of her, and I knew it would be endlessly interesting because I got to look at her face for hours on end. So I started with her. I did myself. I did my daughter, I did my mother, and I did my grandmother. And also in this show, I've started on the men of the family, and I've done my son. But with each portrait, I learn more and more, and you really can't. I couldn't feel like I completed, and I haven't yet, until at some point the series will end, and I'll say enough is enough. The portraits will continue. The breastplates that we're sitting in front of, I did quite a few years ago, and I did a series of 50. These are made out of lead, and lead is a very soft metal, and again, easily sewn.
But it's the tension of lead and the way it's used to be something impervious and just lots of connotations.
It is. There's a lot of contrast with lead. Lead is, of course, dangerous. It's also extremely protective. For instance, when you get an x-ray, they put a lead apron on you. It's toxic. It's very malleable and soft. You can sew lead much as you would a heavy fabric. And I think those juxtapositions were intriguing. And I did the torsos, again, the soft parts of a woman out of lead, because the lead was soft, but also hard in a way and protective. So there was sort of a dichotomy between the lead as protection and also the softness of it, which shows the softness of a woman and the vulnerability when she exposes her torso.
Yes. There's also something really interesting about the idea of the flat plane being somehow conceived as 3 dimensions, because these are all flat sheets, right? Yeah. Fabulous. Yeah, they're just absolutely stunning. So the little breast pieces are made out of sheets of lead, but this series of shoes is what?
This is a steel. So I've gone from the very soft to the less soft to the hardest now. And it turns out that steel is really as malleable as anything. It just, you have to heat it up and you have to bang it hard to get the shape out of it.
So you were actually like blacksmithing with these?
So this is like blacksmithing. And again, I go back to my sewing background, which sounds preposterous, but it really isn't. What I'm doing with the shoes is making pieces of the shoes and then shaping them, and then rather than sewing them together, you weld them together, which gives it form. So you're starting with a sheet of steel.
Flat sheets again.
It could be fabric, it could be lead. You cut it and you bend it, or you form it in the case of the metal, and then you weld it together. So you really, it's piecework is what it is.
And it's women's, you know, the idea of women's issues comes back again with the, as Steve Martin used to say, the cruel shoes.
The cruel shoes. Shoes can be very cruel. They can be cruel to the wearer of them. They can be used as weapons. If you pick one up and bang somebody with one of those stiletto heels, you do some damage. And they keep us upright. They make us look elegant. They disable us so we can't run. And I guess I'm looking more at high heel shoes here, which are...
Well, even the ballet slipper, though. The ballet slipper is also a painful thing, and something that is meant to make a woman's leg look longer and more graceful.
Which indeed it does, and probably the cruelest shoe of all is the ballet slipper, given what it does to the toes of a woman who wears them. But they're elegant, and they're beautiful,
Yes, they are
and they're alluring and attractive, so I'm drawn to them. And when I started working with steel, I wanted to pick one thing that would keep my interest to really learn how to do this, to work with steel. So I stuck with the shoes in various forms, and therefore could learn what I was doing, and with forms that were small enough and interesting enough that it would keep my attention.
Another aspect that I love about it is the way you, like seeing one of the shoes is a sculpture that you can appreciate it by itself. But I love the fact that when you see 20 of them, the meanings are broader, and you see the broad implications of cruel shoes in so many different cultures. And so that's all very interesting. You know, I could just look at your work all day, but I'm afraid we're probably nearly out of time. And I wanted to be sure to let people know where they can see more of your work, or how they could get in touch with you.
Yes, I do have a website. It's never completely up to date, but it is www.ninafletcher.com.
Simple enough.
And I do work out of a studio in Gloucester now, and can be reached at my email, which is ninafletcher4 @gmail. Anybody who's interested in coming to the studio and looking, I would be most welcome if they're in the Gloucester area.
What a wonderful invitation that is. We should get a bus. No, it's really been wonderful looking at the work, Nina. I enjoy it so much. And as I said before, seeing the body of work together has made it all richer for me, as opposed to seeing a little bit here and a little bit there. So I'm going to say thanks for joining us for today, and I hope you'll be with us again next time for another edition of Arts and Ideas.